This aircraft was the primary seaplane used by the Luftwaffe in World War II, deployed in many roles, and despite a bit of a rocky development and its quite unusual design, it became very successful during its lifetime. This was the Blohm Voss BV138, the so-called Sea Drake. So let's see the history of this aircraft today. Though this plane became famous in World War II as the main flying boat used by the Luftwaffe, its roots reach back in the early 1930s. In the 1920s and 30s, the German flying boats were well known around the world, carrying passengers and cargo everywhere on the globe. Maybe the most well known were the flying boats built by Dornier at that time, like the DOJ and the giant DOX models. The German Air Force also used the Dornier flying boats as long-range maritime patrol planes, utilizing the DO-16 and later the DO-18 models. But soon another manufacturer appeared who demanded a place in this segment of the market, and this was the Blohm Voss Shipbuilding Company. Just like many other businesses, they also went through a hard time during the recession in the early 1930s, and to diversify, they established a new aircraft building company, the Hamburger Flugzeugbau. The new company didn't waste time, and soon their designs appeared in almost every civilian and of course in military tenders. Their HA-137 model competed with the famous Ju-87 Stuka for the dive bomber role. And the HA-140 design was the main competitor for the Heinkel HE-115 float plane. I already made separate videos on these aircraft, so if you're interested in their history, check them out. Since the main business of Blohm Voss was shipbuilding, it was fitting for them to enter the competition when in 1934 the RLM set new specifications for a new long-range maritime reconnaissance aircraft to replace the older Dornier flying boats. Their team, with the lead of Dr. Richard Vogt, started working on designs for the new requirements. The resulting aircraft was quite unusual looking for a float plane. It had a very short hull, featured a twin boom tail, and originally a gull wing design, with two engines positioned close to the wing mounting points. The original plans were to use the new BMW 15 engines, but since the development of these was delayed, the RLM proposed to build multiple prototypes, with different engine configurations, all providing around 1000 horsepower. The V1 was planned to use two BMW engines, and the V2 variant to be built with Daimler DB600 ones. By March 1935, the mock-up of the plane was ready, but instead of the originally planned BMW engines, now it was meant to use the Junkers UMO 206 diesel engines, which developed around 1000 horsepower each. The RLM soon approved the mock-up and the construction of the first prototype began. By the time the first airframe was ready in late 1936, it became clear the UMO 206 engines will not be available, so the designers had to use the less powerful UMO 205 ones, which only developed 605 horsepower. This led to the addition of a third engine in the center between the wings. In this picture showing the V1 prototype, you can see the original gull wing configuration and the later added third engine in the center. It took more than half a year in the factory to implement the required modifications, so the maiden flight of the type only happened in July 1937. 3 months later, in November, the slightly modified V2 variant joined the testing. But it was quickly discovered the airframe was not strong enough to withstand the open seas, so several modifications were needed to make the type acceptable. As a result, they abandoned the similar third variant, but since the RLM was satisfied with the plane's performance, despite the early problems, the development jumped to the A0 pre-production series, which featured most of the required modifications. Its hull was almost 3 meters longer and became sleeker. The tail booms were redesigned to be stronger, and many other smaller changes were implemented. The initial armament was placed in a powered turret in the front and 2 open positions in the rear. This variant fared well in the trials, and 5 more pre-production variants were ordered to be tested with different engine types. The BV138 was not only unique amongst the flying boats because of its interesting design, but despite its size, the aircraft could also be launched with a ship catapult. They were also capable of using the Volta rocket boosters, which shortened the takeoff distance by a great margin. A further unique feature was the use of the diesel engines. which were not in high demand, so they were easily available, and as an added plus for a flying boat, they made it possible for the aircraft to land on the sea and refuel from a U-boat if needed. The first production A1 variant featuring all the changes made its maiden flight in April 1940. And though the type still had additional trials to complete, the first two aircraft finished were immediately pushed into service in the Norwegian campaign. But the rush into service, of course, took its toll. After the type started flying missions, again new problems were discovered. The operations of the A1 variants over the Bay of Biscay showed the hull, floats and other parts still need additional reinforcements. And the engines and armament needed modifications as well. This led to the B1 variants, which again featured reinforcements on different areas of the plane, and used the stronger U-Mode 205D engines, now producing 880 horsepower. And if we're talking about the different versions of the plane, let's take a look at the variants. The V1 and V2 were the first prototypes tested by the RLM. The A01 to A06 variants were the pre-production aircraft, featuring the modified longer hull, stronger tail, and other improvements. The A1 was the first production variant, using the U-Mode 205C engines producing 605 horsepower. Only 25 were built from this variant, as experiences showed the need for additional changes on the type. The B0 was the next development of the type, featuring structural reinforcements. After the weakness of the hull on the A variant was discovered, the A04 model was sent back to the factory to work out the needed reinforcements, and became the first BV138B0, the base for the B series. The B1 version was upgraded with the 880 horsepower U-Mode 205D engines, and featured additional reinforcements based on the experiences gathered during the first combat missions. Only 21 units were built, as the production quickly swapped to the next C1 variant, which was the definitive version, featuring again additional reinforcements, a 4-bladed propeller on the center engine, an enclosed rear gunner position, and many smaller modifications. 227 were built. And finally, the MS variant was a minesweeper version. These planes were converted from existing aircraft. They had their armament removed and carried a large magnetic ring to explode sea mines. The BV138 was 19.85 meters long, with a wingspan of 26.94 meters. The plane had an empty weight of 11,770 kilograms and a maximum takeoff weight of 17,650 kilograms. It was powered by 3 Junkers U-Mode 205D engines, developing 880 horsepower each. With these engines, it could reach a top speed of 285 km an hour and a cruise speed of 235 km an hour. It had a range of 1,220 km and a service ceiling of 5,000 meters. The plane's armament consisted of 2 20mm cannons in the front and rear turrets, and one 13mm machine gun in the upper rear position, and optionally one additional machine gun fired by the radio operator. The plane originally could carry 3 50kg bombs or 250kg depth charges under the starboard wing. Later, the U1 modification allowed the same load under the port wing as well, effectively doubling the payload. The type first saw action during the German invasion of Norway in 1940, when the Luftwaffe needed troop transports and 2 of the pre-production planes were immediately pushed into action. Though at this time the type was still improved quite fast between the variants, by the end of the year it was declared combat ready. The first production models started their service flying reconnaissance missions from France over the Bay of Biscay. During these missions, weaknesses of the A1 variant were discovered, which led to the development of the B1 variant, which featured many reinforced parts. The type was mainly operated by the maritime patrol units of the Luftwaffe. These units were responsible for patrolling the coastal waters of Germany and its occupied territories, as well as conducting long-range reconnaissance missions over the Atlantic, where the BV138 played a crucial role. Its long range and flight time made it ideal to locate and track Allied convoys, and aid the German U-boats in their missions to disrupt Allied shipping. In addition to the reconnaissance and anti-shipping role, the type was often used as search and rescue aircraft, as they were able to land on rough seas and carry several passengers. They mainly operated on the North Atlantic and the Arctic seas, tracking and attacking convoys heading to both England and to the Soviet Union. After 1943, many of these planes were deployed on the Mediterranean as well, flying missions against Allied shipping. Then as the Allied forces advanced, they were pulled back to the Baltics. As the war progressed and the Allies gained air superiority, these relatively slow planes became more and more rare over the seas. Still, many of them stayed in service until the very end of the war. Though this aircraft was developed years before World War II, and it was a very unique design, it served the Luftwaffe all through the war, and was one of the main maritime patrol aircraft of the German forces. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.